Dem expert witness couldn't cite evidence of benefits of trans procedures for children. Well, they couldn't cite it because it doesn't exist. I've scoured the studies myself, even the governmental owned studies. It actually shows that the procedures harm children. Experts know this, but they're so afraid to speak out on it because they don't want to be called transphobic and all these other names that they call people who speak truth to this stuff. And the majority of Americans don't want this to happen to their children, but they continue to push this because big medicine makes oodles of money, make millions of dollars off of these procedures. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button, share this out so we can get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. It has a link to my Patreon where I talk about things I can't talk about here. In fact, I talk about the study, this one particular study that was done by the NIH. I talk about it on my Patreon. So check that out as well. Also, check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for news. All right, let's talk about this news. On Wednesday, Rep. Dan Crenshaw grilled a so-called expert witness on the issue of transgender procedure for women, during which she failed to cite even a single study showing that cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, or surgeries have any positive impact. In fact, I told you, the studies that I read, it shows it has a negative impact on most people taking these things. And all you have to do is talk to the people that are detransitioning, and they can tell you how bad this stuff is and how their schools and the community push these procedures on them. Again, I cite one of the studies in on my Patreon, so check that out. And I'm surprised that Dan Crenshaw even speaking out about this. Well, really, I'm not. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'm not surprised that he's speaking out against this. I don't like Dan Crenshaw, but this is something that the overwhelming majority of Americans don't want to see this pushed on children, but they continue to try to push this anyway. So this is kind of a softball thing, I think, for Crenshaw to hop off of his rhino horse to actually speak out against this. So, but Dr. Meredith McNamara, an assistant professor of pediatrics at the Yale School of Medicine, testified in a hearing in opposition to a provision that would block federal funding for hospitals that provide transgender services for minors. Quote, "This is taxpayer money, and when 70% of taxpayers oppose this barbaric treatments on minors, then taxpayers should not fund it," Crenshaw told her. And that's what I was talking about. 70% of taxpayers do not want this procedure done on children, but yet the government is still funding it. But during the exchange, McNamara accused Crenshaw of cherry-picking data to support this position against transgender procedures for children. Again, I read the National Institute of Health's own study showing that this is not it's not beneficial for children. The government owned study, so no one is cherry picking anything. But quote, "It is very unscientific and flawed to pick a single study or a single statistic and to discuss it in isolation," she said. And totally agree, Crenshaw said. "All the medical experts are able to talk about all the evidence as a whole," she added. Totally agree. "So it's good to look at systematic reviews." Right? Crenshaw asked. "That's the gold standard of evidence when you're trying to understand whether something works or whether it doesn't." So the British Journal of Medicine looked at 61 systematic reviews with the conclusion that, quote, "There is a great uncertainty about the effects of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries in young people." Journal of Endocrine Society came up with the same conclusion. Even the American Academy of Pediatrics all cite the lack of evidence. So here's the thing, Crenshaw continued. If you're doing a therapy and it's, temporary, whatever, fine. Maybe let's see if it works. But when you're talking about permanent physiological changes, do you not agree, just from an ethical standpoint, that you might want extremely strong evidence of benefits, and there is no systematic review that states that there is a strong evidence of benefits? Great question. Again, I gotta commend Crenshaw on this, even though I don't agree with him the majority of the time. He's right on point with that statement. And McNamara, clearly hoping to corner Crenshaw, asked, "Sir, are you aware of how the quality evidence grading system works and how it's applied?" Yeah, we read through it. That's why I'm citing these journals, he said, before turning the tables on her. So which journal says something different? We should have that debate. Tell me a journal that has done systematic reviews that cites different evidence, that cites strong evidence for different for benefits of these therapies. Great question, because there is none. And McNamara then tried to tout the standards of care, but despite repeating requests for her to cite any journal or study that concludes transgender procedures are beneficial for kids, she couldn't do it. Quote, "The standard of care, that's not a journal, that's not a study, that's not an organization, that's not an institution. You're just saying words," Crenshaw said. Name us one study. But it's true, standard of care, I mean, you should go off of what the studies say. It's evidence, supposed to be evidence-based. Standard of care is evidence-based, and she's not quoting any type of evidence. I wish Crenshaw would have said that. But why couldn't she name a study or review of studies? Because she knows none exists. And I'm glad Crenshaw actually called her out on that nonsense. And they talk about all the time. They beat in your head when you're studying mental health about using stuff that's evidence based. And none of this puberty blocker stuff is based on any type of evidence. So that has nothing to do with standard of care. But let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe. And check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.